All right. Okay, good evening. Let's get started. We're starting about 12 lines or so from the bottom of Ayin Amid Beis, and we will be going to the bottom of Ayin Beis Amid Aleph, so a lot of ground to cover. I'm going to move pretty quickly. Let's start with a pasuk. The pasuk says, "Amar behona b'neshech v'tarb." If a person increases their wealth by charging interest, l'chonen dalim yikabsenu. It's not good. All the money is going to go to the poor. My l'chonen dalim. Amar Rav kigon shvur malka. This is going to be like shvur malka. We don't know what in the world that's talking about. Ayin in the Rishonim, Rashi says, Melech Paras. Haya, he was the king. V'notal maman Yisrael v'chonen b'hem dalim nochrim shem dalim in mitzvos. So what happened was that if in fact I would make my millions from ribbis, so like shvur malka, the money would be taken from us and be given to non-Jews. Rashi says, why is it that the non-Jews are called dalim, that they're poor? Lav dafka. So Rashi says it's because they're dalim b'mitzvos, is that we're the privileged ones in that way. Being the am hanivchar, we have mitzvos. They don't have mitzvos. We have this neutral par of attachment to mitzvos. No, they are diamonds. Every one of them is a diamond. So that's what the Gemara says. What? We do at times call ourselves dalim. That's right. The Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman on this. What did Rav Nachman say? Rav Nachman said, Amar lihuna lo nitzrocha ela de'afilu ribis tovei kochavim. No, really what it's coming to tell us is that you're not allowed to take interest even from a goy. That's a stira. We learned yesterday in the Mishnah at the top of the page, you're allowed to take interest from a goy. So that's what the Gemara says. Rav Nachman, what are you talking about? What? Let's see. Esvei Rava le Rav Nachman, the Nachri Tashich. The pasuk says, this is a pasuk in Sefer Dvarim. It says, the Nachri Tashich u'lachicha lo tashich. That's what the pasuk says. To a goy, you should be tashich, you should charge ribis, but to a yid, you should not. So the Gemara says, my tashich lav tashuch, that you're supposed to charge ribis. Says the Gemara, lo, it means tashich, that you should not pay ribis. Says the Gemara, I'm obligated to pay ribis to a goy. The pasuk says, the Nachri Tashich. Lo sagi de lav hachi. It would be usher if I didn't pay rib. But what are you talking about? What does that even mean? Says Gemara, no, it's just la afuke achicha dilo. It's just coming to teach us about a yid that by a guy you can do ribba stuff, but with a Jew you're not supposed to. So says the Gemara that doesn't make sense either because achicha behedjuk kasabe. The Gemara says that the pasuk is explicit about it in Sefer Dvarim. The pasuk reads, "L'nachri sashich ula achicha lo sashich." I don't need the first part of the pasuk to teach me the second. The pasuk says, "Bejek sibu l'chicha lo sashich." Says the Gemara, a very important rule of thumb: "Lav or Allah be'aseh v'lo sa'aseh." So we've learned on Daf Beis that there's two lavin, and now we have an aseh attached to it, which means that with the isra of ribis, well, these are pretty heavy weights. So now we have three things going on. There are times in halacha we have an aseh and los aseh mixed in with one thing. But here what we're saying is that there's a triple. There's two isurim and one lav for every loan of ribis. And the halacha is very stark about it. Says the Gemara, Esvei, okay, you answered up the Mari Makom of the Pasuk and Dvarim, but what about the Mishnah that's on the top of this page that we learned last night? Says the Gemara, Esvei, hold on one second, Rav Nachman, how can you say what you just said, that we're not supposed to be involved with in ribis with goyim? Loven mehenu malvin osam beribis v'chein beger toshav. What are you talking about? The Mishnah on the top of the page says that we are allowed to loan to a goy with ribis and a ger toshav as well, parenthetically, and it will not be so parenthetical soon. But for the moment, it's parenthetical. A ger toshav is not a Jew. A ger toshav is someone who keeps the sheva mitzvos b'nei Noach. I've met people like this who are halachic Noahites. I did a circumcision for one over there by Chicago Center for Torah Chesed down the block, right there. Goy de Oraisa. And there was a Chabadsker who was at the bris. I said, I know what I'm doing here. I don't know what you're doing here. I said, I'm here l'shem gerus. He said, no. He's like, I have a chavrusa with them. I said, why do you have a chavrusa with them? He said, the Lubavitcher Rebbe held that there's a din of kiruv because there's 7 mitzvahs that need to be kept by goyim. And if I can be makarev them from keeping 4 to keeping 7, I've been marba kvod shamayim. They're keeping 7. So I said, okay, but don't the Yidden take priority?
Like we haven't finished that.
We have 613 and we're struggling to keep 10. Yeah, why are we prioritizing?
Agreed.
Whatever, just saying there's Amma Nivchar and there's the Hamonam. It's not right. He was maskim to me, by the way. He was maskim that there's a prioritization, but Afal Pikin, the Rebbe held that. So he had a chavrusa with this guy. Unbelievable. How do you teach Torah to a guy? I don't know how it works. Yeah, but even the technicalities, how do you build a bezdin? You need Sanhedrin for that. You need to learn Shas. You need to. It's very difficult. Okay, so says the Gemara, how can you tell me Rav Nachman in the name of Rav Huna? How can you tell me that it's supposed to teach me that we're not allowed to loan with ribbis by goyim? Hare, we have our Mishnah that says it's not. Amar Rav Chia bar Hare de Rav Huna lo nitzracha ella. Turning to the top of Ayin Aleph Amar Aleph Bichtei Chayav. What do we need to loan with ribbis for goyim? That's only if you're struggling to make ends meet. So okay, you go to college, get a job, try to make money. If that doesn't work, then you can lend with ribbis to a guy. That's one approach in the Gemara. The Ravina says on the top line, Ravina Amar, no, we're dealing with knowledgeable people. We, in this case, would actually be in the category of knowledgeable people. How so? Time on my gazer rabbanon. Why did the rabbis restrict us from charging ribbis to goyim? Because, says the Gemara, Shem Yilmod B'Maisa. We're afraid that if you are you've habituated and now you constantly are charging ribbis to a goy, we're afraid that you might do the same thing with a yid. But if you're a Talmud Chacham, we're not concerned about that. The Talmud Chacham who lo Yilmod B'Maisa. So take people like us. Okay, we're not categorical Talmidei Chachamim. We know you're not supposed to charge ribbis to a yid. I have an opportunity to loan to a goy. Pasha, you can charge interest. So these answers are cholek on one another. The first answer says you can only do it din b'diavad when you're broke. The second answer says you could do it as a business model as long as you don't bring it back into the frum community. You're allowed to charge interest to a guy. State in Shulchan Aruch. This is what's quoted in Shulchan Aruch in Yoredeh Kufna and Tesif Aleph, which speaks about the halachos of charging interest. And Lamaisa, we're allowed to charge interest to a guy, provided that we're lo yilmad b'maisa. So says the Gemara. It's fascinating, no?
I mean, it's interesting that it's a bag. Because, I mean, like anybody who knows anything knows that that's one of the, it's.
Yeah, we are creatures. We are creatures of habit. We're not. It's not stam. And we do. The Gemara has a din called Omer Mutter. Right. The Gemara says if you do something one time, so then you're more likely to do that avera again. So, right, not salok. So that's what we're concerned about. We're concerned that perhaps a person will learn a bad habit from interacting with Goyim and bring it back into the frum community. So all of that was approach number one of Rav Huna, who said that you're really not supposed to be working with Goyim, and the Gemara gave the two answers. So now the Gemara says on Ayin Aleph Amud Aleph that perhaps we misunderstood Rav Huna. Ika de Masni Law, the line of Rav Huna, perhaps it was taught Lahad Rav Huna, aha. It was taught on the following case. The Tani Rav Yosef, the pasuk says, "Im kesev talves ameis ha'ani imach." If you loan money to Jews, to the poor person among you, and the Gemara now gives a very clean, a very easy, and a very beautiful set of pecking orders for Jews. So says the Gemara, Ami v'nochri, if you have an opportunity to be kesev talves am, if you have an opportunity to loan between your own nation and not your own nation, Ami kodem, pasha, it's ABCs. Ani ve'ashir ani kodem. You have a poor person, and you have someone who is very wealthy but needs a little cash. He doesn't have a lot of liquid money. He's a billionaire on paper. So then ani kodem, also pasha. Aniyecha, your own poor people, your family members are broke. Ve'aniye ircha, so aniyecha kodmen. The Gemara says aniye ircha ve'aniye ir acheres, aniye ircha kodmen. Prioritizations, right? This is what people say this in shul sometimes. Aniye ircha kodmen. What? Right, Hilchos Tzedakah, exactly.
So we don't have to give to the guy with the green card?
You should give to both. You should give to both. Yeah, you're if you're hedging, you need to follow the priorities. That's correct. If you're choosing between the two, you should choose your own city first. That's correct.
Fascinating Russian shiur.
Which Rashi?
Right, we said amcha, right?
I read the word as imcha. I did not read it the way you're. No. You're correct. I didn't read it the way.
That's fascinating. I mean, it's but
yeah, but the way I understood the Rashi is you spend more time with them. I don't know. I didn't even. I don't know. Fascinating. I did not read it. I just read the word wrong. Pasha, that's very interesting. That can't be. That's Pashkafa.
There's something about, because you're part of that seaboard, there's something that you have to show that that seaboard is important to you.
Yeah.
Interesting one. Okay.
Look at the previous Rashi. Previous two Rashis.
Ima hakrovim.
And look at the one before that too. Ani aniecha v'ani ircha aniyim shem kroven umimishpachtecha. And maybe it is imcha in the pasuk in the Rashi. Okay, it's beautiful. Thanks for pointing that out. Now we need to look it up. My brother has the Steinsaltz. I'll ask him what the. That's the pasuk too. Yeah. Okay, let's continue. Amar Mar, I don't understand. Says the Gemara. We have a brisa, but the brisa says Ami v'nochri Ami kodem. Come on. It's family. It's family. It's not rude. It's family. By the way, this is like a big thing. Like in the biblical criticism, Christian, they're like, kamocha. You're right. You're right. You're not my reya. You're not my family. I have a family. We're about 15 million week, but we're family. So you. So then the Gemara answers the question. Amar Rav Nachman. Here's where Rav Huna comes in. Amar Rav Huna lo nitzrocha ela de. That's the chiddush of the Gemara, is that even if you could make money off the guy, or you could lend to a yid and not make money, and then the yid comes first. So now it's not just a question of who's who; it's also a question of sacrificing profit for the sake of fulfilling the mitzvah of imkesef talves ami. It's a halachic standard because there's a mitzvah deraisa to loan. So obviously, you have a mitzvah deraisa to loan to your family. You're taking a financial loss in a chanami. You're taking a financial loss. A few brises in a row. We're 12, 15 lines down. Ayin aleph amid Tanya Rabbi Yossi bo re'eh sami yuseinem shal malvei ribis. Let's see how blind the people who lend in ribis are. Let's talk about a non-ribis case. Adam kor lechaveru rasha. I walk over to you and I say, you know what, Gerald, you are a rasha. I'm not nice about it. So what's Gerald gonna do? Yoredi Molochayev. He's going to get up in my grill. We're gonna have it out. How dare you call me a Russia? What are you talking about? What do you think I did? But Behaim, the Malve Ribis, if you're being Malve Beribis, you've had to go through a whole process of things that are wrong. What have you done? Mivian Adim, Vilavlar, you bring witnesses, you bring a scribe, Vikulmos, you bring the quill, Udio, you bring ink, Vikosvin V'chosman, you're writing and you're signing, and Plonizek, Kofar Belokei Yisrael, this guy. This guy is mamish. He doesn't believe that Hashem provides parnasa, and nobody blinks. Nobody blinks. You want to call me a rush? I get all upset. You're malva beribis. We just spoke about the fact that there's 2 isuri doraisa lavin and 1 isur aseh. It's a big deal. So we're just blind to certain isurim. This happens in communities as well. We were just talking about this this past weekend about how elements of the otherwise Orthodox community eat in non-kosher milchik restaurants. Me'echatesi. So we've made certain things mutter. They're not mutter. They're not mutter. It's not okay. It's usher. It's not. You're not allowed to do that. What I just said? Oh, the ribis. I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is. And by the way, forget about all the nuance. I'm just talking about the basic isser of ribis of I'm lending you money, you're paying me back more. Okay, heter iska. We gotta do it the right way. Okay, Tanya, the next brisa, third of the way down. Rav Shimon Elazar Omer, Kol mi sheyesh lo Ma'os, anybody who has money, umalve osam shelo beribis, and you lend money without charging ribis, meaning you're an er l'chayid, you do it the right way. You are the kind of guy whose money you gave that you lent without charging interest, v'shochad al naki lo sikach, and you didn't take any bribes. Ose'ela lo yimot lo. These people, their feet are firmly planted; they will not slip. What's the backhanded inference from this? So you will see, if not today, then tomorrow, that you who lent money, beribis, you'll see that your finances will slip. Says the Gemara, I hear you, but it doesn't always look like that, right? Sometimes we see people who do things wrong and they're getting their reward in this world. Says the Gemara, we see that that's not always true. Sometimes people don't lend with ribis and they slip. The people who are tzaddikim, who lend the right way, they're mismotetin ve'olen. If they slip financially, they'll come back up. They'll have a downswing. 2008, they'll come back up. However, the other people who loan with ribis, mismotetin ve'enon olen, they will go down financially, or maybe it's not talking about finances. Maybe Al derech drush. I don't know. Maybe he's talking about Gehenna. I have no idea. So then the Gemara says ve'ein ol. And similarly, the pasuk says in Sefer Chabakuk, the pasuk says, Lama sabit bogdim. Why do you see Hakadosh Baruch Hu people that are rebelling? Tacharish, you're being silent. Bivala rasha tzadik mimenu, and he's the rasha is swallowing the righteous. So it says the Gemara, Amar Avhuna tzadik mimenu boleya. If you have a guy who's a tzaddik, okay, he's a regular tzaddik, as it were. He will get consumed. However, tzaddik gamur eino boleya. But if you have a person who's a tzaddik gamur, and in the context, a tzaddik gamur is defined in this context as someone who doesn't loan beribis. So then he is not boleya. You can't consume that guy. He is protected. He is protected. It's a shmira, seems from the Gemara. It's a shmira to not loan money beribis. Tanya, next brisa, last of the short lines. This is a lengthy stretch, this piece over here. The Gemara says, Rebbe Omer, I didn't understand two things. Ger tzedek ha'amar le'inyan mechira. A ger tzedek is someone who is a proper ger. As we will soon see, yes, of course, halachically, they're 100% Jewish, but not everything is the same between a ger and a regular Jew. Of course, a sensitive topic. When someone converts, they've made huge sacrifices to get to where they are, turning their whole life around. But there still are some halachic differences, as we'll soon see, because their parents are not Jews, so there's some implications. So says the Gemara, that's one thing. And case number two is V'ger Toshav ha'amr le'inyan ribis, and the Ger Toshav mentioned in our Mishnah on the top of Ayin Amud Beis, because we had said in that Mishnah V'chein V'ger Toshav. So says the Gemara, Eini Yodea Mahu. Who's talking here? Rabbi Huda Hanasi. Unbelievable thing. So the Gemara then says, let's get into it. We're going to learn each of these topics. Ger tzedek ha'amr le'inyan mechira. When we talk about a ger tzedek who is going to be buying a slave, let's see what the pasuk says. When you have a brother who gets crushed, namely you have someone who has no money left, and he sells himself to you, not just to any Jew, but even ela lager. He even will sell himself to a ger. Shneimar lager. Below lager tzedek, not only will he sell himself to a ger tzedek who's an actual yid, elo the ger toshav will even sell himself to a ger toshav who, as discussed, is a goy, but a goy who keeps the sheva mitzvos. B'nei Noach. Shenemar lager toshav. What does the pasuk mean when it says mishpachas ger? This is a pasuk in Vayikra. Zehanochri. A person might even rent themselves out to a nochri. And kshu omer ole le'eker. What does that part of the pasuk mean? Says the Gemara, Zanimkar lavodas kochav matzma. That's a person who sells themselves to an actual oved kochavim. When a person is broke and they're destitute, they need money, they will take themselves and sell themselves to get money. What are you supposed to do? You gotta make ends meet. So Amar Mar, let's analyze this. We had said in the early parts of this person who was Yamuch Achicha, who had no money and was selling himself. We had said in the Gemara the following. We had said, and we're 4 lines into the wide lines at the end of that line of we said that it seems to be that an Eved can sell himself to a Ger. So let's now just drill down on the question. Can a Ger buy an Eved? Can a Ger own an Eved? So says the Gemara, Lameimer de Ger kani Eved iri. Is that really true? After all, it's not true. Uraminhi, we have a brisa. Ein hager nikne be'eved ivri. A ger cannot be involved with an eved ivri. Ve'ein isha beger, a woman and a ger, they are not able to be konin eved ivri. So one can't be purchased by an eved ivri. A ger can't be purchased by an eved ivri, and a ger can't purchase an eved ivri. Ger lo nikne be'eved ivri. Why can't he be purchased? It's because it says v'shavel mishpachto ba'inan. We need it to be that an eved is in the category of v'shavel mishpachto by shmita, by the end of a yovel cycle, or even by the end of a shmita cycle. But v'haleka, this guy has no family to go back to. His parents are not his halachic parents. A big shilas mitzvah of kibbud av v'aim. If a brother converts and then a sister converts, can they marry? These are discussions that they're not related to those people anymore. I don't know what the din is l'maisa. We discussed that?
We talked about it.
I don't remember the din.
I believe we saw somewhere that like it would technically that.
It's probably bad for the gene pool.
That's true.
Trying to remember
We definitely
But
discussed.
when someone joins Yisrael, it doesn't really, I mean.
they're not.
Yisrael's one big family.
You're like a brand new born baby.
You're new. and you're not related to your previous family. So let's say you have Jack and Jill who are brother and sister of a Goyish family. So then they end up both converting separately. So why can't they get married? Maybe midoraisa they can, midrabanan we're concerned, something like that. I just don't remember.
That sounds.
Okay, so the parents aren't their parents, but that doesn't necessarily mean they don't have a relation.
They don't have a relationship. There's no mitzvah of kibbut avim.
No, but I'm saying it's still a sister.
No, it's not.
Still a brother.
It's not. They're a brand new creation. I'm just.
They're still a person, but not.
They're a person. They're a person.
That I get, but why not as a family as Klal Yisrael?
What are you saying? They are
Klal
Klal. They are
Yisrael is
Klal
a
Yisrael.
whole big family.
Yeah, but the limits in halacha of who you can marry on the sibling level is incest. And meaning, if I share a parent with my sister, I can't marry her. But this guy, while they do share parents, this guy Jack and Jill of family Smith, right? So then they are not related to one another even after they convert. Biologically, they are. But I can give you a case of halacha l'maisa where the biology is in line, but they're still not married, or they're still not Jews. Jewish genetic material, non-Jewish surrogate. You go do 23andMe on that kid, 98% Eastern or Western European, do whatever they are. Doesn't matter. Go d'oraisa, according to some posting. So the biology is not machriya. All right, let's get back in here because it's that's an unrelated sugya. So that's what the Gemara says, that an eved can't be purchased because an eved, I should say, a ger can't be purchased as an eved because he can't be shavel mishpachto because he doesn't have a mishpacha. Vein isha v'ger konen av eved ivri isha lavo rachara. It's not appropriate for a woman to have an eved ivri. I mean, major tznius infractions potentially. There's an isur yichud. It's a lot of problems. You can't have a woman living in a single home having an eved ivri. That's not okay. It's not acceptable. We'll get into this in a minute. Ger nami, the same thing is true about a ger, that he can't own an eved ivri because gemiri, we have a tradition. The makni kani, only that which can be acquired can also be. You have to be able to be both. If you can't be an eved, you can't own an eved. So the makni kani, the lo makni lo kani. But if you can't be an eved, then you can't be kone an eved either. So how earlier could you say that a ger was able to be kone an eved, or at least imply it? Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, Eino kone, the ger can't be kone an eved in a regular way. Bedino ki Yisrael. You can buy an eved ivri, but he wouldn't have the din of a classical eved ivri. Aval kone bedino kenachri. You'll buy him, but he's treated a little differently. The eved ivri that the ger buys is not your classical eved ivri. He's treated like a nachri. How so? In that it won't pass on to the next generation. So let's say a ger who has no parents, and because he has no parents, he can't be an eved, and therefore he can't buy an eved. So therefore, when he does buy an eved, the eved doesn't have the rules of eved ivri as the rules of nachri. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Hanirtza. This is, I think we saw this Brisa elsewhere in Shas. Yeah, we saw it in Kedushin. The Brisa says that if there's a person who decides to stay and he gets his ear pierced, or if a person is sold to a nachri, so it says the Gemara, Eino oved lo es haben velo es habas. That's a distinction between a ger tzedek and a regular yid. That by a regular yid, if I buy an eved, I pass him down to my children. But if a ger purchases an eved ivri, the halachos about that eved ivri is that the eved ivri is treated like a nachri, and therefore it's not passed down to the next generation. Amar Mar, ve'ein isha v'ger konen eved ivri. We had said that. We had said in the Brisa that a woman and a ger are not allowed to purchase an eved ivri. Respectively, we gave those reasons. By a woman, it's not orach ara. By a ger, because he can't be an eved, he therefore can't own an eved. Says the Gemara, Nema, perhaps we should say the Lo Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Why? Tanya, the Brisa writes, Isha kones hashvachos, a woman can acquire maidservants. Ve'ena kones ha'avadim, a woman is not allowed to purchase male slaves. That's not appropriate. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer af kones ha'avadim. Wow, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel allows for that. So says the Gemara, no. Afilu tema Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel lokasha kan be'eved ivri kan be'eved kanani. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel makes a distinction in regards to a female, let's say a single woman owning a slave. He says there's a difference between an eved ivri and an eved kanani. They're both men, and we should have a risk of cohabitation. So says the Gemara the following, Chakira. Says the Gemara, 10 lines from the bottom, Eved ivri tzniala. When a person is a Jew, they're going to be more tzanua. And if, God forbid, something inappropriate happened, The Eved Ivri is less likely to talk about it. He's got family in the community. He cares. However, Eved Kanani Paritzla. The Eved Kanani is your classical Goyshe Bashuk, and he doesn't mind talking about, who he's cohabited with lately. Ella says the Gemara, Ella Hadatani Rabbi Yosef, Ar Malta Lo Tirbi Kalba. Wow. The Gemara says that a widow, a woman who lives by herself, is not allowed to raise a dog out of concern that if it's a male dog, that she may violate the Isser of sleeping with an animal. Velo tishri barbe rab beushpiza, nor should she have, a boarder in her house. That's also not allowed. So it says the Gemara, Bishlama barbe rab tzniala. At least I could understand why you can have the boarder live there. The boarder is learning in a local. It's a what?
It's the other way around. Sneal means he'll be kept quiet.
Yeah.
She's not afraid of the problems.
Bishlama barbe rab tzniala. Yeah.
Right, and therefore you're not allowed.
Correct.
Yeah.
100%.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, no, if I said that it was a mistake, that was definitely what I understood. Yeah, Bishlama Barbe Rav, she can host the border because she cannot host the border. I said it wrong twice in a row. Now I know where the problem is. Yeah. Bishlama Barbe Rav, I understand the din of Barbe Rav because Sneala, we're concerned about that. Ela Kalba, why can't a widow raise a dog in her house? Kevan de Misrachba, because we're afraid that something bad will happen, and mirtasa, so she should have some yira. If we're afraid that people are going to say something about her, she should have some yira. Why would we forbid the raising of the kalba? So says the Gemara, Amre kevan dechishajala umtza, because if she were to, give a treat to the dog, masrech bita, because the dog would then follow after her, and masrech basra, the dog would follow after her. That the animal would follow her because of the fact that she gave the dog some treats. We were basically trying to figure out, Ladina, whether or not it's acceptable for a woman to raise a dog. Because if the dog would follow her after they cohabit, well, then there should be some yira. But the Gemara says that's not the case, because if she treats the dog nicely by feeding him, a special treat, he'll also follow after her, which means that there's no yira by the dog. So Shteit and Shulchan Aruch, I just checked. A woman is not allowed to raise a dog by herself.
Even if she's single?
Only when she's single. That's the din in Shulchan Aruch. I don't know. I don't know if it's the Maisa. I don't know if there's concern. I don't know how it works. I again put my hat in the ring to not be a posik. My daughter wants to buy a bunny. Whatever. Oh no, yeah, just I know. If you saw her skills in that arena, you wouldn't have asked that question. Okay, so that was the first thing that Rebbe didn't understand. And 6 lines from the bottom says the Gemara, Ger Toshav Amar Leinian Ribis Mahi. Let's come back to our sugya. We deviated because the first part of the brisa that Rebbe was talking about was about the Ger Tzedek. So now let's come back to a Ger Toshav. As mentioned, a Ger Toshav keeps the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach, and in our Mishnah, it seems to be that it's mutter to do ribis with a Ger Toshav. So Mahi Dichsiv Ki V'chiamucha Chicha Matayado imcha v'chazakta bo ger v'toshav v'chayimach al tikach meito neshech v'tarbis. It seems you can't take neshech v'tarbis from them. Or mini, how can the pasuk say that you're not allowed to take ribis from a ger toshav? After all, mini loven mehen umalvan osam ribis v'chem ger toshav. I mean, the Mishnah on the top of Ayin Amud Beis was black on white that you're allowed to take ribis from a ger toshav. So says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom on Ayin Aleph Amar Aleph, Amar Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, Miksiv al tikach me itam. Look at the pasuk, 4 lines from the bottom. In the middle, it says al tikach me ito ksiv. Where do we have a limit of taking ribis? Mi Yisrael. So a little bit of the pasuk doesn't read smoothly. It doesn't translate well in halachic terms. And really what the Gemara means to therefore say is that the only isser of ribis is between 2 Jews. However, between me and a ger toshav, it's absolutely mutter to do ribis. Again, maybe with the qualifications at the very top of this page, is it bichdei chayav, or is it only for Talmidei Chachamim because we're concerned about Asi L'Misrach? That we have to factor those things in. Ton Rabbanon, the rabbis have taught us. We're on the very bottom of Ayin Aleph Amid Aleph, heading to the bottom of Ayin. Oh my gosh. Okay. I don't know why. For some reason, I thought we were only going to the bottom of Ayin Aleph Amid Beis. Let's see how late we go, because I have a meeting at 10 o'clock. So, and I have to get home before then. Ton Rabbanon, the rabbis have taught us Al Tikach Meito Neshech V'Tarbis, that you're not supposed to take Neshech V'Tarbis. Aval Atana Selo Orev. You're allowed to be involved as a guarantor, which is really interesting because we learned already that a guarantor is part of the Isser. So let's figure this piece out. Arev Laman, who are you a guarantor for in this process? Top of Ayin Aleph Amid Beis. Ilema Arev LeYisrael, if you're the guarantor for a Jew, we already learned that that's Aser. Viha, and this should be Lechora Tnan. Tnan, and this is a Mishnah that we saw in, that we will see on Ayin Hamid Beis, but we also saw it earlier in the Masechta. Elu Ovrim Below Saaseh. These are the people who violate the Isser of Ribis when they're involved in lending with interest. Hamalve ve'alove ha'arev ha'edim. What does that show you? That an arev is not allowed to be involved in Ribis. So Mehechatesi, that on the very bottom line of Daf Ayin Aleph Amid Aleph, that the Brisa says avalata naselo arev. So says the Gemara, Ella, you're right. Perhaps you're going to be an arev lenachri. You'll be an arev for a non-Jew. The cave and the dine the nachri the azil basar arva. Since in secular courts the monies between the malva and the love always go through an arev. Ihu nihu de kashakal min revisa. So he is the one who's taking the revisa. The arev is very much directly involved. So that's not so simple. So therefore, we don't really know who the arev is talking about in the Brisa. So the Gemara responds, Amar Rav Sheshes shekibel alav. He's a non-Jew, but he was mekabel upon himself ladun b'dinei Yisrael. He's a non-Jewish arev, but he's using the templating of the Jews in that the malva and the lova interact directly. And in that case, the arev can be involved without Isser because he's not being involved in the actual malva-lova relationship. Says the Gemara, if the guy is behaving like a yid, so great that the arev is allowed, but yidden don't lend with interest. So then ribis nami lo lishkol. What are you doing? If the guy is trying to behave like a Jew in as much as the arev is outside of the malva-lova relationship, he's a guarantor financially, he's that co-signer, but he has no direct involvement. If you're like the Jews have it, if that's how you're going to structure it, then the goy shouldn't have charged interest in the first place. So the Gemara says 8 lines down, heading to the 2 dots. Amar Rav Sheshes shekibel alav lazu v'lo kibel alav lazu. The guy said, I want to be like the Jews, but I only want to be like the Jews in regards to their art. I still want to charge interest. So a little bit of a unique case where the Brisa is referring to an arev. The case is where there's a non-Jew who was makabel upon himself to structure the loans where the arev is external to the malva-lova relationship, but he doesn't want to absorb the yidden halachos around ribas, in which it is not allowed. At the 2 dots, 10 lines from the top of the page on Ayin Aleph Amid Beis Malva, Yisrael ma'osav shel nachri midas hanachri. That a person is allowed to lend the money of a nachri with the knowledge of the nachri. When we learned this in the Mishnah, we highlighted, as Rashi pointed out there, that mefarish b'gemara, we don't know what the case is. So Tana Rabbanan Malva Yisrael ma'osav shel nachri midas nachri v'lo midas Yisrael. We don't know what it means. Ketzad, what's the case? We're a quarter of the way down on Ayin Aleph Amid Beis. The Gemara says as follows: Ketzad Yisrael shelava mos min hanachri b'ribis. If you have a yid and he borrowed money from a guy, so let's say we have Moshe and we have Chris, right? Let's get some pretty typical names. How about Paul? Let's go a little bit less. Paul's a little safer, right? So you have Moshe borrowing money from Paul. So Moshe is a yid. He borrows $100, and he has to pay back 120 to Paul. So it says the Gemara, he has to give the money back. And then in the process of bringing the money back, it was 120, right? He had to pay back more. Matzu Yisrael Acher v'amar namely, we find Jew number 2. So Moshe has a friend named Chaim. He says, namely, you and I can go into the same transaction, same deal. That's usher, because the 2 Jews are interacting directly, and it looks like ribis, because Moshe borrowed 100 and he paid back 120. He borrowed 120 from the love. So that doesn't work. But if the nachri was there to interrupt, meaning to be an interruption between, a handoff almost between Moshe and Chaim, then that's mutter. If you have the reverse, a nachri shalovamos misrael beribis, you have a non-Jew who borrowed money from Yisrael, from a Jew beribis, ubikesh lachzir, it was time to pay back, and then mati Yisrael acher v'amar lo, namely, another Jew says, take the money, v'ani alelecha kederch she'atamala lo mutter, because the nachri Jew relationship is fine, but v'im he'emidu etzel Yisrael, if the nachri was standing with both Jews in the same spot, asr, that's not allowed. So says the Gemara, Bishlam Seifa L'chum. I understand the Seifa case that we're going to be machmir. That makes sense to me. Elaresha, in the first case where we have the Yisrael who borrowed, so there, if that's true, says the Gemara, Kevan de'ein shlichus l'nachri, because there is no shlichus for a nachri, so who cares if the nachri is involved? Ihu niu de'kas shakil minei revisa. A goy doesn't ever have a status of a shliach. That's one of the many things about being a goy, right? So I have this little shtick I do at brisses. I always say to the father, look, you can either man up, scrub in, and circumcise your kid, or you can appoint me as your messenger within the scope of Jewish law. So for humor purposes, I do it at most brisses. For halachic purposes, I do it at Yiddish brisses. But the father's a goy d'oraisa. When the father's a goy, there's no shlichus of the mitzvah of mila. He has no mitzvah of mila, and he's not a shliach. A goy can't be a shliach. So says the Gemara, if the goy can't be a shliach, then even if Moshe and Chaim are standing with Paul, he's still ain't shlichus l'goy. It should still be ribis. So the Gemara says, and to this there are many answers, and it will take us to the top of Ayin Beis Amud Aleph, and we're halfway down on Ayin Aleph Amud Beis. Here the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna bar Manoch mishmei Rav Acha berei Rav Ika hacha b'mayaskinan kigon do Amar le hanicham al gabe karka v'hi pater. When Moshe and Chaim are transacting with this money that Moshe borrowed from Paul, we're dealing with a case scenario where Paul said to them, put it on the ground first. So says the Gemara, well, if you put it on the ground first, then we don't have to worry about ribbis. It's not mechzek ribbis, because now you gave it back to Paul. So says the Gemara, if in fact it's true that the money was put down in front of Paul, and now Chaim and Moshe finished their transaction, of course that's mutter. It was handed over from Moshe to Paul and then to Chaim. So then, of course, that should be okay. It says Says that should also be pasha. It says that in this transaction, when Moshe gives the money over to Paul, and Paul then hands the money over to Chaim, I might have thought that the whole time Paul was holding the money, he knew exactly what was going on, and he was just a go-between between these two Jews, and it should still be ribbis. Kamash Malan, that if we interrupt the ribbis process with a goy, it's not ribbis anymore. So now you can come up with a massive loophole in ribbis. You come up with a loophole that looks like this. I want to give you a loan. Let's say I want to give David a loan. And there's my shegitz Paul in the middle. I say, Paul, I'm going to give you $1,000. You give the $1,000 to David, and David will pay me back $1,200. So according to the Gemara, there might be some knech, some little kulas as to how we could get around ribbis in a mutter way. The Gemara says it's mutter. It doesn't say it's pater. It says it's mutter. So this might be something for poskim to use as a tseruf. Maybe, I don't know what a heteriska says. What does a heteriska basically say?
No go.
No guy? What does it say?
If you become partners. You're a partner.
Oh, you
and
should.
If you don't pay, then, but you can pay interest instead of taking him in.
So it's a mekach. They change it. They get rid of the halva status.
With a clause that says if you lose the money, if you're the borrower, if you lose the money, you agree that either you take a shiur in shul with the black candles holding the Sefer Torah, or you'll pay him back no matter what. And since option one almost never would happen, it just means you're gonna end up paying. But you're makabel it on yourself, not the Torah's ribbis.
But it's Torah's shut.
Money, yeah.
But it's Torah's shutvis.
Yeah.
But it's not mekach. I guess it is. I guess it is.
The ISKA idea, like we saw a couple days ago,
Yeah.
partnership idea where you have I have all the money and you're gonna do all the work.
I'm the worker.
So it's a partnership, but the lender is willing to give up his share of the profits for an amount equivalent to the interest rate.
Say that one more time. He's willing to give up his portion.
His portion of whatever profits there are from being a partner in exchange for the interest payment.
That's
Right, like I limit it to that amount, even though you take that money, invest it and like who knows what.
right.
The other partner is not.
So we flip it. We get it out of the halva space, basically.
Become partners.
Right.
But it's a nearly guaranteed payment because you set up
Right.
the option to be not an option.
Got it. Okay, let's move to answer number 2 about this as to how we understand what the non-Jew's role is in this triangle of people of Moshe, Chaim, and Paul. So says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down, even a little bit more. First words on the line. Rav Ashi Omar ki amrinun ein shlichus lanachri hani mili b'truma. He says, no, this is really the real deal. The only time we don't have truma by a goy is by, the only time we don't have shlichus by a goy is by truma. Aval b'chol Torah kula yesh shlichus lanachri. Big machlokas. It's huge. Do we say a goy is a shliach? Yes or no? Shlichus is real. Shlichus is not, it's not a conceptual thing. I don't know if this works, but can a goy be a shliach for a get?
Why?
Because the only limit, right, just right. What would be an example? Where would shlichus be shy? Well, I guess here, no, by mitzvah, he's not even shy.
I can't think of
So,
where,
right.
I guess in business, not in the mitzvah.
I mean, by the Isser of Ribbis, the Gemara is using it as an example that if the goy is involved, he can ruin a Ribbis, whatever. He can remove a Ribbis between Moshe and Chaim.
Was the definition of, and then at that point, a shaliach,
Yeah,
or he's just somebody who's.
No, he's a
close to the
shliach.
transaction?
according to Rav Ashi, at least, he's a shliach. According to the previous Samora, which is Rav Huna Bar Manoach, he's not a shliach. There is no shlichus by a goy. Wow, the Rishonim must have like the best. This is like candy, like discussing these different possibilities.
This doesn't last long.
No, no. It says that it's going to be triply rejected, actually, but
At all.
no big deal. Bahad Rav Ashi Berusa or Bedusahi, his shita gets rejected. Let's just make sure we understand. Rav Ashi wanted to posit that the only time there was no shlichus by a goy was by truma, but by all other areas of halacha, again, whatever that means, because it's not true for everything, but by all other areas of halacha, goy has shlichus. Says the Gemara, why is it that Rav Ashi is wrong? Because my shna truma delo. Why is it that by truma we said that he can't be a shliach d'chsiv atem, which is gam atem, ma atem b'nei bris af shluchachem nami b'nei bris, and shlichus d'chol Torah kula nami mitruma gam rinanla. We learn as a binyanav from the world of truma about a goy and shlichus, and just like by truma that a goy has no shlichus, what he's supposed to do? Just the way that things are, and therefore there's no shlichus by a goy ever. Ela de Rav Ashi berusahi, must be that we reject it. And Nika de Amre, some say that there was a little bit of a different version of Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi had, in his first approach, said that there is no shlichus by truma, but shlichus everywhere else. So let's see version number 2, 10 lines from the bottom. Rav Ashi ki amrinu nein shlichus lanachri hani mili inhu ledidon aval anan ledidhu havina lehu shliach. It's a one-directional type of shlichus. That's hani mili inhu ledidan. They can't be a shliach for us. Aval anan ledidhu havina lehu shliach. We can be a shliach for them. An unbelievable splitting of a hair. It's very hard to understand. Again, without a Talmud Chacham, without knowledge base, I'm just reacting from what we've seen. It doesn't feel right. Don't worry, this doesn't stand the test of time either. Why is it that they can't be a shliach for us? Because the pasuk says atem gam atem l'rabo shluchachem atem b'nei bris av shluchachem b'nei bris. That yidden you have to be a yid. You have to be a yid to be a shliach. So therefore, anan l'didu, for us to be a shliach for them nami ma atem b'nei bris kamar. You both have to be yid, and you can't be a shliach for someone who's a guy. Rav Ashi is rejected now. Elahad Rav Ashi berusahi. Says the Gemara, no dice. Third answer, how this triangle of Paul, Moshe, and Chaim works out. Ravina Amar Nihit Shlichus L'Nachri Lesle. I agree, says Ravina, no dice, that there's nothing to talk about. However, Zechia Midrabanon Isle Midi Dahave Akatan. Again, another Lamdish Sugya, last line of Ayin Aleph Amud Beis. And this says that even though it's true that there is no shlichus But midirabanan, a goy has the power of zechia, of giving partial ownership to something. And what that means is that when Moshe gives the loan over to Paul, Paul can be mizake it to another person, midirabanan. And the Rishonim here really struggle with how this undermines ribis deoraisa. If all that the shliach is doing is zechia midirabanan, how does that correct ribis deoraisa? Okay, go spend a couple weeks learning. So it says the Gemara, Katan lava fal gav the less beis shlichus isle zechia midirabanan, top of ayin beis mid aleph. Halchanami loshna, the same is true by a goy. That the whole thing is midirabanan. It says the Gemara, Velohi, we reject all of this. Yisrael asi lechlal shlichus, akum lo asi lechlal shlichus. Says the Gemara, no, apples and oranges. These two cases, shlichus and zechia, there's nothing to talk about. At least by a katan, he's shaykh to the world of shlichus, that we should extend the katan to the world of zechia. But that's definitely not happening when it comes to the world of a goy. Tanu Rabbanan, fascinating piece of Gemara, 3 lines down on Ayin Beis and Aleph. We're going to be going until 5 lines from the bottom. I'm sorry for the long shiur, but we can't fall behind. Tanu Rabbanan, Yisrael shalava mos min hanachri beribis. Listen to this case. A Jew borrows money from a goy with ribis. Paul, please give me $1,000. I'll pay you back 1,200. And then after the loan, I rewrote our document to say not that I'm borrowing from you, but I just straight up owe you $1,200. And then he converted. Yeah. This sounds like my weekly phone calls, like, well, I got pregnant and then I converted it on Shay, whatever. Okay. So says the Gemara of Anis Gayer, there was a conversion. If the guy wrote up the shtar, he changed it from a love to simply a chov, that you owe me 1,200, and he did it before he was miskayer, goves hakeren goves haribis. Then even after he's a yid, no problem. He can collect the keren and the ribis because it's no longer keren and ribis. It was zakvan alaba milva. He rewrote the loan. However, if he converted first and then rewrote it, then only goves hakeren. Then he can only collect 1,000 because he's a yid now. And the current structure of the loan, even though the loan initiated when he was a goy, but because when he converted, the loan still looked like, and it in fact was a ribis loan, eino goves haribis. So it's amazing because the guy converts, he's no longer family members, but his old loans are still functional, right? They don't lose their status because they're external to him. Let's talk about a slightly reverse case. You have a non-Jew. Now we're flipping the case. The first time the Jew was the love. Now we have a non-Jew who's the love, shalova mos misra beribis, which is mutter. V'zakvan alav b'malveh, and then the Yisrael, who was the malveh, rewrote the loan to say it's not a loan, it's just a chov. V'niskayer, and then the loveh, who did the borrowing, he converted to Judaism. Imad shelo niskayer zakvan alav b'milveh, if the shtar was rewritten before the giur of the loveh, goves hakeren v'goves haribis, he can collect everything, no problem. But if the loveh converted afterwards, goves hakeren ben goves haribis. And Rabbi Yossi has a crazy sheet. Rabbi Yossi, no, nachri shalova mos b'Yisrael beribis, benkach o benkach goves hakeren v'goves haribis. You can always collect everything, which is really odd. Why would that be? Amarava, Amarav Chizda, Amarav Huna. First of all, halacha Rabbi Yossi, we paskin lekula, that if the nachri who borrowed converted, no matter when the loan was rewritten, before or after conversion, doesn't matter, the Yisrael can collect any money he wants, including the ribis. So says the Gemara, Amar Rava, my time of Rav Chizda. Why the Rabbi Yossi, why would Rabbi Yossi say that? The Gemara halfway down on Ayin Beis Amud Aleph says, because we don't want anyone to think that there's an ulterior motive in why this person converted. I converted, to save a couple bucks. I didn't want to pay the ribis, or maybe a lot of bucks, whatever the case may be, depending on how things work. Fascinating Gemara. Okay, halfway down, we're almost done for the day. Tanu Rabbanon. If you look on the Amud Beis, you'll see why I'm pushing so hard, because we have a big Shabbos ahead of us. Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis have taught us, shtar shekasu bo ribis, konsenoso, if there's a shtar, just a shtar, that writes about ribis. All right, I'm going to borrow money from Michael, and I'm going to pay back Michael 20% more. Konsino. So there's a knas. What's the punishment? Ve'eno gova loas hakaren ve'loas aribas tibir. You lose everything. You lose everything. If I write a star with you, Michael, or if Michael writes a star with me, I'm going to borrow 1,000 and pay you back 1,200. I lose all of the money. No, yeah, that's not right. You're always allowed to collect the karen. Just the ribis is the isser part. So, b'mai kemiflage, what are Rav Meir and the Chachamim arguing about? So says the Gemara 3 lines before the wide lines. Rav Meir savar kansinon ateri mishumisura. We're slapping you on the wrist. We're saying that which is mutter is removed because of that which is usher. We're throwing out the baby with the bathwater. Lo kansinon hetera mishu misura. We do not have such a knas. So it says the Gemara lastly, last short line. Tanan Hasan, we have another Mishnah. This Mishnah we learned on Daf Yud Zayin, and it's found in other Maseches as well. We've seen this one many times. Shtarechov mukdamin. If you have a star where the date was predated, so that's puzzle as it relates to this. They're psulin. Havehame ksherim. But if you have a star that's date was post-dated, right? So the star took effect on January 1st, but the date was January 2nd, that's kosher. Mukdam and amai psulin. Why should we say that the one that's the early one is puzzle? Of course, you can't collect anything from the date because the date was an early date. But nigvu mizman sheni, we should just follow the second zman. So this, the Gemara says, is Amar Shem ben Lakish, b'machlokes shnei v'Rab Meir. That is our machlokes that we had above in the Brisa, in the Mishnah, I should say, that we saw between Rav Meir and the Chachamim. Rabbi Yochanan argues and says, no, everyone agrees with this Mishnah. The Mishnah that says that shtarei chov mukdamin are psulin, Rabbi Yochanan Amar afilu temer rabbanon gzeir shema yigba mizman rishon. We have a concern. If I have a shtar mukdam, the shtar mukdam says that Michael and I went into business on January 1st. We didn't really go into business until January 8th. So if someone wants to collect from me on something during those previous 7 days, we're just concerned they're going to make an error. That's why we don't allow for a shtar mukdam. We're going to stop right here, 3 lines into the wide line, 6 lines from the bottom of Ayin Beis Amud Aleph. Mir Tashem on Shabbos, I think we're 631. No, Michael, did you check? So on Shabbos, we'll start at 631 from Ahu Gavra on Ayin Beis Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the bottom. Wishing you all a beautiful night.